Welcome to the Grid Podcast, Episode 6. Our goal is to educate and bring hard-hitting truths about America's critical infrastructure. I'm your host, Maria Sumnicht. So, political opinions expressed in this podcast by participants are their own opinions and not necessarily that of the Grid Podcast. Additionally, the Grid Podcast does not endorse or assure accuracy of information presented. We invite you to please do your own research with these topics. With that said, please hit the subscribe and notification bell so you can be notified when we go live. Like the video, it helps us promote the channel on YouTube. Our topic today, the state of control system cybersecurity. This is in my wheelhouse, and I'm so excited to have Joe Weiss on this show. And we're going to be talking about operational technology networks and how they're being attacked with a plethora of ransomware attacks. What is not so evident is that these control systems are also being impacted as control system field devices have no cyber forensics, nor is there training to recognize a control system incident as being cyber related. So there have been many control system incidents in every sector with significant physical impacts. So moreover, physics-based attacks can bring the grid down for an extended period of time. So with that, I am absolutely honored today to have control system cyber expert Joe Weiss, an international authority on cybersecurity, control systems, and system security. So let's dive right in, Joe. I'm excited to have you on the podcast.
Okay. Maria, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfect.
Okay. First of all, thank you for the invitation. For those that don't know, Maria and I have been working together for a number of years, and it's been a very interesting, neat collaboration because she brings subject matter expertise I don't have, and I think I have some that she doesn't have. So it's been very neat. I guess I should go ahead.
Yeah, let's start, Joe, by, can you explain what control systems and operational technology are so we can set a foundation for this?
Yeah. In fact, before I start anything, I just want to give my background so people
Okay.
have an idea of what's going on. I'm actually a nuclear engineer. Started off life, I'm in the San Jose area because right out of school, I went to GE Nuclear, which was in San Jose. And my focus was instrumentation, controls, equipment diagnostics. And most important of all, my focus was safety. And that focus has permeated everything I've done my whole career. My first roughly 18 to 20 years was playing normal control system engineer, whether it was for nuclear, fossil, substations, you name it. And I had spent almost 15 years at the Electric Power Research Institute. And in 2000, everything changed because that's when I started or helped start the control system cybersecurity program for the electric utilities. And when we started, its intent was to look at what was not being looked at because, if you will, security is a three-legged stool. You have physical security, which is guns, gates, and guards. You have data security, which is what people now normally associate with cybersecurity. But the third piece was control system cybersecurity. And the real focus of the program when it started was control systems because the rest of the world was going to have to address Windows and other data issues. But the electric and other industries had to address control systems because that was, if you will, out of the out of bounds, if you will, for traditional network people. Now, the other thing that happened was until roughly 2006, there was engineering and there was IT. There was no such animal as quote unquote OT. OT was a term that was basically developed by Gartner and published in 2006. And it was a way of discriminating because Gartner was an IT company. And therefore, they really didn't understand control systems. So they were able to come up with this term that would separate what their specialty was of IT from everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But until that time, there was no such animal as OT. The other point about this is, in fact, I'll talk more about this as I go through the initial, if you will, series of slides just to level set people for what we're talking about and why. So, with that, I think what I'll do is just start. And then hopefully from there on out, it's going to be Maria asking me questions and hopefully people attending asking questions.
Yep, in the chat.
So,
I'll keep an eye on the chat. So are you
okay.
gonna,
So,
I'm gonna go ahead and do your screen share. Do you have it up?
perfect.
Okay.
It should be up.
Oh, yeah.
Hold on. So, can you see it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, anyways, what I wanted, what you see in that little picture is that networking and engineering are a square peg in a round hole.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been fighting this battle. I hate to use that term for 30 years or so. And the point being that these are two totally different disciplines that are all of a sudden being forced fit into one spot and it doesn't work well. And I'm going to talk more about that. So the first point I want to bring up is control systems are ubiquitous. The pictures you see are on the top left is a nuclear plant. You have a water facility. You have manufacturing. You have electric grids. What you're seeing in the lower right is medical, or lower left is medical devices. And then you see, rail or whatever. The point being, control systems monitor or control physical processes in real time. Our body is a control system because it's controlling our temperature, our blood pressure, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
The when you put a tea kettle on a stove and you want to heat it up to boiling, that's a control system.
Yep.
It's controlling that physical process in real time. Now, the other thing I want to get across is many people have heard of two of the key terms, probably the third, not that much. The first key term I think a lot of people have heard of is called SCADA, supervisory control and data acquisition. That is not every control system. That just happens to be one type of control system. There's another one called PLCs, programmable logic controllers. Again, many people have heard of that. That is not the only control system. There are many, many others, including other types of control systems that do the same thing as a PLC. So the issue is there's a lot more than that. And then you have the actual devices. A process sensor is where you physically measure things: pressure, level, flow, temperature, voltage, current, you name it. A thermometer, when you go to the doctor's office, is a process sensor. Actuators are things maybe like a solenoid or a valve. Drives are things like um, uh, that are, in a funny sense, an extension, the real live extension of controllers. That's what, if you will, moves valves or fans or things like that. Positioners tell you where these things are. Analyzers tell you how much oxygen you have in the system or things like that. Obviously medical devices, and finally power supplies. You almost, you rarely hear any of that being discussed when people are talking about quote unquote OT. But this is the fundamental underpinning of what makes a control system different than, say, just a computer system at Macy's. I think this first point is also very important. Critical infrastructure cyber began in 1998 when Bill Clinton issued PDD 63. And in there it said all critical infrastructure was to be cyber secure within 5 years. That meant we should have been done in 2003. So when I said, when Maria said, and I'll be saying continuously, this is not a political problem. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. We've had multiple administrations from both sides since 2000. We still don't have a single critical infrastructure, not one, that is cyber secure to this day. The second point that's really, really important, and this was Professor Ross Anderson, I think he was Cambridge, and he recently died. He was one of the real luminaries in cybersecurity. And what he wrote in his book, Security Engineering, is about building systems to remain dependable in the face of malice, which is what most people think cyber is, an attack, error or mischance. And the reason is, and that's why I've got the next, what is a cyber incident?
Mm-hmm.
To IT, you're connected to the internet, you're running Windows, and data is maliciously being manipulated or stolen. So if you're familiar with the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, availability, effectively it's all about C, confidentiality or the privacy. The NIST, the Government Accountability Office, ISA, others, the security engineering definition. This is the overall definition.
Mm-hmm.
A cyber incident is electronic communication between systems or systems and people, displays, that affects confidentiality, integrity, or availability. And like Professor Anderson says, it does not have to be malicious. And the other point about this, integrity or availability does not have to be about data. For example, when you have a pipe break that's caused by electronic communications, the availability is not the availability of data. The availability is the fact you no longer have a pipe that works.
Mm-hmm.
So these are very different worlds starting out. You have the data world and you have the engineering world.
Yeah, before you move
This,
on from there, Joe, I want to
yeah,
ask a question because I have a, so just even by definition, there's a cultural gap, right?
yes,
So
yes,
so already there's a conflict between cybersecurity and control systems engineering because they're looking at it completely diametrically opposed to each other.
yes. In fact, here's the other point, and it kind of goes, and I want to give credit. Maria took one of my slides and made it really nice. This is what she was able to do with it. It's a neat slide. But the point being that a control system is composed of many elements. It's got these funny sensors and meters that you see in the upper left. It has communication protocols going from those funny meters and sensors to, if you will, um, uh, master controllers.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's happening in today's world, they're generally converted from this initial serial or analog data or information, and they're converted by things like serial to Ethernet converters into Internet protocol packets. So it's Ethernet or you know um, um, BACnet or any number of um, you know Internet protocols, IP protocols. And what's happening is that the quote unquote OT or IT network world starts when that data is converted into an internet protocol packet. Until then, that's the world of the engineer. And in general, the world of the engineer isn't looking at cyber.
Nope.
The world of the network people start when it becomes a packet. Now, the reason all of that's so important is that these funny devices have no cybersecurity, which means they can be compromised before they ever become a packet. And what that says is where the network people live, they are starting with totally untrusted information. And all of this logging and monitoring that is so important is all starting with untrusted data.
Yep.
I'm going to go to the next, but again, the picture that you see there with the screens, that's SCADA or a distributed control system
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. But the other point that's important is in the industrial world, or I shouldn't even say industrial, in the engineering world, things happen in real time, which is either absolute real time or within milliseconds. The operator doesn't see anything for many, many seconds to maybe even minutes. So, what the operator is looking at is not in real time. What he is seeing is what, or she is seeing, is what has already occurred earlier. And there is this misunderstanding in the industry that it's the SCADA or the control center that's the center of the universe. In reality, everything that's happened has happened seconds, maybe even minutes earlier.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a time delay in
There's a huge, when I was in nuclear,
Yep.
there were regulatory requirements that said you couldn't take credit for any actions for 10 minutes. Because what happens is, and it turns out it's not safe, but if you want to minimize the amount of equipment you have to put in, the sooner you can take action, in a sense, the less automated equipment you need to have there. And the concern was that you couldn't be sure that the operator was really going to get and understand what was going on within a very, very short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So the requirements were that you couldn't take credit for any operator actions for, like I say, something like 10 minutes.
That's a long time, especially at a nuclear facility. When if something
It's a
happens,
hugely,
yeah,
honestly, 1 minute is a long time,
yes,
depending on So the issue is, this whole point was you have to assure that you're safe without the operator being involved. And there is this misconception that safety, and forget about nuclear, that safety comes from the operator. Safety has to come from the systems
Mm-hmm.
because they have to operate within these milliseconds or sometime in electric and nanoseconds. Now, the slide that you're looking at explains, and Maria, you kind of, touched on this. This is where our cultural gap comes from. And right now, I hate to use this poor term, this is the Great Wall of China. Computer science, well, cybersecurity is taught within computer science. And very few universities require anybody in computer science to have to take an introductory course in engineering. The engineering disciplines, electrical, mechanical, chemical, nuclear, systems, civil, you name it, are taught within the engineering disciplines. Almost no universities require anybody taking an engineering discipline to have to take an introductory course in cybersecurity
Mm-hmm.
to this day, which means these two, knowledge centers, computer science and engineering, are totally independent of each other and are working on things that often are mutually exclusive to each other. And what I tried to show in this slide, you see the four arrows, because that's
Yep.
showing that most people going into security are coming from the network side. You only see one arrow on the other side because there are very few people coming from the engineering side into cybersecurity. And that red area, that little red circle, that is really a dot. Those are not OT security experts. Those are control system security experts. And there are very, 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 very few of them.
So, what do you think can be done to bridge the gap? That get
That's
I
what
mean,
yeah, let me go back.
yeah, yeah.
We've been trying. Um, I've written a couple papers. The shirt I am wearing, I don't know if you see it, uh, doing some work for Sam Houston State University for their um, Institute for Homeland Security. And I've written several papers. Um, a colleague of mine, Dr. Brett Michael from the Naval Postgraduate School, we just wrote an article for IEEE Computer Magazine on the need to have both the cybersecurity and the engineering world working together. I actually wrote an article and gave it in, I think it was in Las Vegas at one of these big computer, shouldn't say big, but computer conferences for the education world.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a paper, like I say, over probably almost 15 years ago on the need to have these, these disciplines work together. Um, I actually I think it was last year, the year before, I was a senior researcher for University of Missouri Science and Technology, and I was supporting one of the professors in a master's class. And what we did, and all of it, there were, I don't know, it was a small class, maybe 5 people or so. What was interesting, none of them had any quote unquote electric or industrial experience.
Mm-hmm.
None really had much. I think one had a computer background. So we were taking quote unquote raw material and trying to mold them into people who would look at both sides. And it worked. It worked because what happened was the capstone for the course was to have them from open source only
Mm-hmm.
pick different, each to pick a different utility or utility equipment company and determine from open source if they were meeting the NIST cybersecurity framework. And what they found was amazing. One person found, again from open source, that one of the utilities was using Chinese made equipment in one of their most critical substations. Another found that a utility was getting all of its uranium for its nuclear plant from Russia. And another, one of the students, remember, these are
Now,
people
this
who
is
had
all
no previous
U.S.
experience.
This is all in the U.S. that we're finding these things.
This is
Wow.
all in the US. Okay.
Yeah.
Another found that the utility had put access to all of their suppliers on the public side of their firewall. And what was interesting was the utility didn't even realize it themselves. Talk about a NERC violation.
Yeah.
And it took a student with no previous knowledge to be able to do this.
Yeah.
So the point is,
Yeah, there's a good question in the chat here. It says, do we just have to wait for something very bad to happen before anyone pays attention to fixing it? If college students were finding this and nothing has been done probably since then, what you have
well,
anything to say to that?
yeah, yep. We had figured, remember, I'm starting day one as essentially January 1, 2000. That's when I started, the control system cyber program at Emory. Prior to that, I was quote unquote anti security. In my engineering job, I was exactly this because putting in security made the system less efficient and less reliable. One thing people don't realize, these systems are designed for performance, reliability, efficiency, and safety. And in many, many cases, security goes in the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
So when you try to, you know, bolt on security, you are absolutely affecting the efficiency, reliability, and safety of these systems. Um, Now, the point that you brought up is a really important one. We had assumed that all it took was one major incident and the world would get it and start doing something. Well, when we first started the program, one of the things we found was there was a cyber attack that dumped a whole lot of sewage. And the person that did it was caught, went to jail. All this was public. Nobody cared. We had the San Bruno natural gas pipeline rupture here in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
The Pacific Gas and Electric was made a convicted felon because of that incident. You had the DC Metro train crash, that killed 11 people. Well, guess what? None of those two, was considered to be a cyber incident. What's happening is if it doesn't look like conventional IT, in other words, the packets in a network being impacted. People simply don't believe it's cyber.
It's a big problem.
And, you know, we've had, like I say, more than 18 million control system cyber incidents to date that have killed more than 30,000 people. The vast majority, vast, were never identified as being cyber. Ergo, people are going, well, it's just another incident. And I'm going to talk more about that in a couple more slides. These are the gaps, and they all come directly from what you just saw. The first is a lack of imagination. And probably the biggest example was in 2008 at the Siemens International User Group meeting in Chicago. Siemens had tasked the Idaho National Lab to do a detailed root cause, or not a root cause, but a detailed cyber investigation of their programmable logic controller line. And it was like a 60 slide deck that they came up with, and it was on the web until we started writing about it. It's no longer on the web, but what they showed, the last, say, 6 to 8 slides, were how to get around the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, the zone between IT and the control system. The next was how to get to the engineering workstation. And here was probably the most important one: how to change logic in that PLC, in that controller, without the operator knowing you did it. This was in 2008. This was Stuxnet.
Yes.
But in 2008, nobody, I'm going to use the word nobody because there may have been somebody who, in fact, I'm sure there was one I can mention that did. Nobody thought that that was possible or a big deal.
Yep.
And when Stuxnet was discovered in 2010, people were totally blown away. How could that ever happen? Who would have ever expected that to happen? And when it comes to the engineering issues, the network security people have no imagination whatsoever on anything that goes beyond the network.
Yeah. Before you move on to the next bullet point, I want to ask you maybe to explain why you mentioned this organization earlier, CISA, why their OT asset inventory guidance document doesn't address issues exploited by Stuxnet, and we haven't gone into Aurora, but we will, and the Chinese.
The CISA, and by the way, TSA, and even to some extent DOE, have very few, I'm not going to say zero, but very few control system engineers involved. And so the focus is on networks. To begin with, to be secure, you need to monitor and be able to secure networks. There is no question, no argument. But when it comes to control systems, you also have to look at, quote unquote, the hardware. And this they haven't done. So when you looked at what CISA put out, and they sent that off to something like 8 nations or whatever, it was to say what should be in the inventory in your program. Well, what they're missing is And it's exactly what happened with Stuxnet. It's one thing to say you need to have a sensor or sensors in your inventory. But what they're doing is assuming that whatever's in that sensor is correct.
True.
What you have is simply an inventory. You have nothing that says, do I believe it's right? Or even do I believe that the sensor signals are actually even coming from the sensors?
Yep.
Now, until CISA put that out, which was a couple months ago, I would say many, I won't use the word most, many end users didn't even have sensors or actuators in their inventory. So, was it an advancement to now make sure that they were included? Yes. But my point is, what good does it tell you to do to say, yep, I've got sensors in there, but I have no clue what's in the sensor
Yep.
and whether I should even believe it?
That was Stuxnet all the way. They,
Yes.
yep, they were reading that the sensors were just fine, but they weren't.
Yep. One of the things about Stuxnet, it was the only time to this day that the cyber attackers, IT, engineering, and physical security work seamlessly together. Isn't that a damning statement in 2025?
Hmm.
You keep hearing all of these people saying how they're working together. No, they're not.
No, they're not.
Now, the next point is really important.
Hmm.
Russia, China, and Iran know how to read the papers or, you know,
Watch the podcast.
read LinkedIn. They're well aware we're not
Yep.
looking at any of this.
Yep.
And the other point is, I want to be careful how I say it. The offensive cyber people, whether they're from friendly or non-friendly, realize that if you want to create damage, physical damage, it's going to come because you've got to the actual control systems and process.
Hmm.
If all you do is get to the networks, most likely, uh, never say never, never say always, most likely all you're going to get is a denial of service.
Yep. Yep.
And quite clear, Russia, China, and Iran, I say others because I don't know for a fact, I do know for a fact, Russia, China, and Iran are all exploiting this to this day,
Yep.
currently.
Yep. And even on our end, Joe, before we move on, the way to secure these systems or this the control systems architecture is really with compensating controls, but no one's even addressing that either, right? Or having a set of standards of any sort.
Yeah, there's only one organization, one part of one organization that's doing this. Um, in this case, it's part of ISA, but ironically, it's not the cybersecurity organization.
Hmm.
They chose not. This is being done within, if you will, process safety, the that particular area, which is the only area I know of anywhere, is the only one that is looking at the intersection of cybersecurity and process safety. And what's interesting, there is nobody from the electric industry involved, nobody from the water industry involved. There's almost no participation from the government.
Why do you think that is? I mean, is it just,
because um, because I hate to say it, NERC and the NERC SIPs to this day, sensors and actuators are out of scope for the NERC SIPs. And politically, the electric industry does not want to quote unquote address something that's beyond the scope of the NERC SIPs.
yep.
They won't do it. The water industry, again, refuses to do this. And yes, I've met with representatives from all. We know there have been real cases where sensors and actuators have been compromised.
Mm-hmm.
This is not part of anything within NERC AWWA, in other words, American Water Works Association. It's not part of what's in the TSA, the Transportation Safety Administration, pipeline cybersecurity requirements, um, aircraft cybersecurity requirements. It is not being addressed by EPA, for water.
Yep.
All
So,
of this.
wow. So, how long would it take the Chinese to trigger an attack on sensors, actuators to break our grid infrastructure in any sector? I mean, do they need AI to do it, or is it being?
Nope.
It's done.
By today, if they wanted. Well, again, I'll give you this. Um, when I left EPRI in 2002, I went to a company called Kima and I started their control system cyber program. And in the end of August, I held the first control system cybersecurity conference. Every single other one that's out there, S4, SANS, you name it, all stem from that. And it was interesting. I'm going to give you a couple of pieces that came from that thing. That first conference, there were three entities that showed up I didn't invite. It's not that I didn't want them there, I just didn't know who they were.
Mm-hmm.
The first was the National Transportation Safety Board. Gee, why would NTSB be at a control system cyber conference? They were finalizing the report of the Bellingham, Washington Olympic gasoline pipeline rupture. That, oh, by the way, yes, it was cyber. There was a rep there from the Idaho National Lab. That eventually led to starting the SCADA testbed. The third, interestingly enough, was from a country in Asia. Two people were there. I have no idea how they found out about the conference. They did, because they had had multiple control system cyber incidents, including one that took out like 10% of the generation in their country. Fast forward to the next year, because I want to get to that for a minute. Um, this was 2003, April 2003. So we didn't have a SCADA testbed yet. So I had invited a number of organizations to give presentations on why they should be the SCADA testbed. Well, one of them happened to have been a part of the US Navy. I was doing work for them. And the first slide they presented, this is on Navy letterhead in this open conference, was a Navy destroyer was entering the port of San Diego. And they hadn't turned off their high powered pulse radar systems. That Navy ship took out San Diego Gas and Electric and the San Diego Water Authority's SCADA systems. The second slide on Navy letterhead was they were doing, again, pulse radar testing, and they ended up blowing up a 36-inch pipeline. Oh, by the way, that has There's nothing within the TSA pipeline cybersecurity requirements dealing with this. And by the way, and this is what led to the title of my book,
Mm-hmm.
Protecting Industrial Control Systems from Electronic Threats. I want to point out more about just how out of touch we are in everything. I had mentioned I was a nuclear engineer. My first 5 years at EPRI was running the nuclear instrumentation and diagnostics program. This is in the late 80s, early 90s. Well, the word cyber wasn't there, but it turns out most of what I was dealing with was cyber. It just wasn't by that name. One of the big projects I was working on were the main coolant pumps in the pump shafts in these huge pumps were cracking, and we were often not able to see the cracks soon enough. So I had started this really big project. And what you see behind all of us is one main coolant pump. A nuke has anywhere from 2 to 4 of those. And what was happening again, the sensors and instrumentation weren't detecting those. On the other hand, you have a network firewall. Gee, what's most important to secure? We're certainly not looking at that main coolant pump shaft
Nope.
and the sensors that are, in a funny sense, misleading. But we're doing an awful lot about the network firewall.
Yep. So this leads right into so there are many regulatory agencies such as NERC. Why won't NERC identify control system incidents as cyber related?
Good question. And a friend of mine and I actually met with FERC commissioners asking that question. Um, the and it isn't just NERC, NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission. This is all the way back 2003-ish, I think. The Davis-Besse nuclear plant had experienced a slammer worm incident that basically shut down communications between the utility and the NRC. It wasn't a safety issue. The plant was shut down. NRC put out a formal document on that, an information notice, and it said Davis-Besse nuclear plant and slammer worm. And nowhere in, I think it was roughly a 10-page or whatever, nowhere in that information notice was the word cyber ever used, despite the title saying slammer worm. When you had the Dolly, the ship that crashed into the Key Bridge, within 6 to 8 hours of the event, the head of NTSB put out a statement that it was not a cyber attack. Nobody had even set foot on the ship yet.
Yep. Or in the harbor.
It was
Yep.
just, and because of that, when they did their preliminary report, CISA, neither CISA nor the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, because it was a Singapore flag vessel,
Mm-hmm.
participated in the development of that preliminary report because NTSB had already said it wasn't a cyber event.
Completely.
And
Right.
NERC,
Yeah.
to this day, they describe the incidents they describe are clearly cyber events.
Yep.
They won't use the word.
Nope. Which brings me to a recent incident in Norway. Do you believe there was another misguided response to the Norway dam? Uh, and And can
Yeah.
that happen here on American for, for example, we have many large dams, Hoover Dam to name one, is a possibility that something similar can happen.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've known about this. I've worked with organizations for a long time on this. People need to understand all of these systems or all of these sectors use the same equipment for the same vendors.
Hmm.
Now, what happened in Norway, the way it was originally described, has a lot of similarity to what happened at Oldsmar, the water system in Florida.
Yes, sir.
In that both of them had cyber vulnerable HMIs.
Hmm.
Well, when things started going funny, they automatically called them a cyber attack. It turns out what happened in Florida, and ironically, this is where EPA's cybersecurity requirements came from. That event, the Oldsmar event, which turned out not to be a cyber attack, it was user error.
Yep.
I've seen things recently claiming that Russia actually did this. Da, 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 da. Again, I go back to we have cyber forensics at the Windows HMI level. We do not have cyber forensics at the sensor or the actuator level. We don't. It's that simple. You know, did a valve open and water come out? Absolutely. Was it because of cyber directly? We don't know.
We don't know, which is interesting because with the with that what happened in Texas with water being let out, and actually they have said that the flood sensors, which measure the water level, uh, that system was down, and therefore they didn't know how much water was being released downstream, which of course led to the flooding of the camp, the Mystic camp, etc. No, there was no warning because it seemed like certain systems weren't functioning, which begs to ask the question, why?
Well, let me. I'm gonna
Yeah, I know
let me
that's
go
a
back
whole
to
different thing, but it happens
yeah.
all
No,
the time.
here's.
Yeah.
I want to take you back for a little bit for a different thing.
Or-
Also, Texas, which is where I thought you were going.
yeah, well, that too.
About 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, a couple of small water systems in Texas and also I think it was Oklahoma and I forget where else were cyber attacked by Russia, and they ended up overflowing tanks. How did we find that out? Russia told us. It wasn't that the utility said, oops, we have a cyber attack here.
Hmm.
Russia told us they did it. Where this gets interesting is I guess it was this year, there was a water system here in the States that had a SCADA issue that opened a valve and basically flooded a part of downtown. How did we find out what happened? It wasn't EPA telling us, it wasn't CISA telling us, it was the local newspaper saying part of downtown was flooded. Everything that happened with Russia doing the attack in Texas essentially also occurred in that other.
Hmm.
But because nobody claimed responsibility, that was never identified. We found out because somebody happened to see that in the local newspaper.
Yep.
Again, I go back to we don't have the right training. The
Nope.
training today is for the network firewall. The training today is not for that main coolant pump.
Yep. And
Now,
recently, yeah, go ahead.
here's you know what's happening is you keep hearing about like Jaguar Land Rover, when they had that big ransomware attack and the
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of millions, or even honestly, even Colonial Pipeline, which was a ransomware attack.
Yep.
These are critical infrastructure incidents that caused major damages. Only almost none of these were identified as being cyber related. So I'm deliberately not saying most everything I have there, with the exception of the ammunition explosion in Tennessee and the aluminum plant fire in New York. All of the others I know that I have identified here were cyber related. Were they malicious? That I can't say. Was it cyber? Yes. Do we know enough about what happened in Tennessee with the ammunition explosion or with the aluminum plant fire that recently occurred or some of the
What the
recent
oil?
refineries?
Yeah, the oil refinery in Los Angeles, the port down
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. El Segundo. Do we know? I mean, we just had another one, and this gets more interesting. This was one of the largest refineries in the Midwest, here, states. And what did it say? It was a technical issue. That was interesting. That using that term, it was a technical issue.
Yep. And I want to touch on the water because we can survive without electricity. I know it's going to be hard to do without our computers and cell phones, but water, the average person and a child can't go more than 3 days without water. And we saw this in Pennsylvania with the Water Authority of Aliquippa. And
Aliquippa.
yeah,
Yeah, let me, before you go further, because you brought up Aliquippa,
yeah,
this brings up another, going back to why don't we identify and why don't we look? Aliquippa was the Unitronics controller issue.
yes.
It occurred Thanksgiving weekend of 2023. And it turns out it wasn't just Aliquippa. It was also a small brewery in Pittsburgh and 27 other uh, critical infrastructures throughout the country.
Hmm.
What was it? It turns out the Unitronics controller, and by the way, how did we find out about it? Because it turns out Iran hacked the HMI and said they were there. And why did they do that? Because the Unitronics controllers were made in Israel. This is a nation state targeted cyber attack against our critical infrastructures and, if you will, our, suppliers. Now, what we don't know is, did Iran also compromise the controller logic? Again, neither, CISA never said that. They didn't look. All of CISA's uh, recommendations were purely IT in nature.
Right.
Absolutely nothing about the actual controller. Nothing.
This is so. Do you believe government officials need to recognize the importance of control system cybersecurity, and why haven't they? Last year, I
Oops.
presented to I went to
Here's,
DC and presented to Capitol Hill these issues in front of one Senate committee and another a House committee, and nothing. So
I've
they know.
testified. I've testified 5 times to Congress. But look at this. This is 1998.
Yep.
What it's saying is it isn't the presidential administration, it's the people who've been there the whole time.
Hmm.
Why won't they look? Why won't they get the right people?
That's a good question.
And they're still not.
Hmm.
There has never been a um, any form of CISA or DOE or any other type of um, quote unquote cyber disclosure on a sensor or an actuator.
Yep.
And they have no cybersecurity in them. And there's never been a disclosure to this day.
Yep. There's a question in the chat. It says, he says, "Well, maybe I'm dumb, but is there any alert systems in critical IoT? Not that I've seen."
Um, here's another interesting thing, and it's what is IoT?
Yep.
Um, I have a slide in another presentation I didn't put up here, but the point being, you have IoT, which I call Fitbits in refrigerators. They're little
Hmm.
sensors or whatever, to give you data. Okay. Then you have IIoT or pick another term. IIoT is Industrial Internet of Things.
Thanks. Hmm.
Okay. And you have military Internet of Things, you have medical Internet of Things. These are, if you will, cheap, you know, sensors that are, um, strap on or, glued or whatever, but you don't have to poke holes or do anything. And they provide data, particularly for doing big data analytics.
Hmm.
They do not do control or safety. The sensors that do control and safety are not IoT.
That's true. That is true. That's what's missing is a clear definitions of all these devices. I'm going
Well,
to call them in general. I'm going to call them devices, but they definitely are
well,
in their own category.
the it's like, when I was, back roughly around the 2000-ish area, we were trying to, improve the grid and go from analog to digital and everything else. It was really falling flat until, they were able to come out with this new smart grid terminology. And all of a sudden, all of this stuff was going on. But the smart grid wasn't the substation. The smart grid was what you had in your house.
Yep.
Well, it's the same thing with IoT. We're not, I was just literally even this morning, there was a webinar on sensors. And the guy even said on that thing that the actual sensing elements, where you would measure
Mhm.
pressure, level, flow, temperature, voltage, distance, color, you name it, are essentially the same sensing elements that have been there since the 70s, 80s, 90s. What's changed? The communications,
Yep.
not the sensing.
Yep. The interdependency and the interconnectivity of systems that were never maybe meant to be connected, but now are.
Well, again, I go back to, and I think this is why PDD 63 was issued, because we had, whether it was in electric, whether it was
Mm.
in uh, chemical, oil, gas, we had interconnectivity back in the 90s. That's the reason PDD 63 was issued.
Yeah.
People don't seem to add one and one and come up with two. If we didn't have connectivity, there was no reason to issue PDD 63.
Right.
It
Right.
was issued because we had it.
Yeah.
But Maria, what you said is what most, especially the sales FUD going on in the cybersecurity world is. Oh, OT is new.
Hmm.
Um, they're just now connecting things. No, we've been connected with since the 90s, which is the reason for PDD 63. The fact that these people had never seen a control system until recently doesn't change things.
Yep. And
I think about what's going on in Atlanta in that conference, my old conference. They're not talking about these type of issues.
no, it seems like it's been hijacked from control system engineering topics, and now it's more IT focused, and it's moved away from its original,
That's what
core.
that's what Gartner did with the term OT.
Yep.
Before the term OT came around, anybody from IT that wanted to go into a facility needed to be escorted. The idea that somebody in OT or in networking could lay out rules that could affect the operation of a turbine would have been heresy. It's insane.
Yep. Yep. And I'm going to throw a real monkey wrench in all this. they're they're looking at placing artificial intelligence solutions, appliances, thinking that this might help. What are your thoughts on incorporating AI? And what do you think could be a result of moving too quickly in this area, not really understanding um, control systems?
Well, I think, again, there's definition issues.
Hmm.
What is exactly the definition of AI? And part of the reason I say that, I actually got a patent when I was at EPRI, in this case with GER&D, on um, using fuzzy logic in turbine controllers. That was in, like I say, that was in the 90s.
Yeah.
Um, we did a project, and it's been written up in Again, IEEE computer. It was basically dealing with using machine learning with process sensors. And ironically, that work was done 1 month before ChatGPT came along. So the issue is, can advanced communication and network and
Hmm.
algorithms and whatever be really valuable? Absolutely. Um, can it also be anything that's used by the good guy can be used by the bad
Bad
guy?
guy. Correct.
Okay. So everything you think about, the bad guy's already thinking about. But the other point is AI, and we learn this, or neural nets, or you know, any of the others. There's a very old saying: garbage in, garbage out.
Hmm.
If you, and that's our problem today with the sensors. There's no cybersecurity, there's no authentication. You don't know today if that voltage signal going in the transformer to the transformer tap changer, is that coming from a voltage sensor within the transformer, or is it coming from Beijing?
That's true.
We don't know.
We
We
don't know.
don't know.
No, we don't.
Okay.
Okay,
Now,
go ahead.
it's, how is AI going to help us there?
Yeah.
That's a question,
Yeah.
not
Yeah. No.
anything else.
Yeah. I mean, in my humble opinion, you'd have to look at re-architecting your network if you're going to use AI. AI should just be a consumer of data on the network. In other words, unidirectional data should be fed uh, into an AI network that's really isolated in a sense that maybe a data diode can be placed in the control systems environment where data comes out, but AI is not allowed to manipulate sensors, valves, controllers, anything in that environment. You just don't want anything. You There should be a human decision tree somewhere in there, because to allow AI to manage actual control systems, I don't think is a good idea
Well,
for many reasons.
here's the, you brought up data diodes.
Hmm.
Data diode is good technology that's a traffic cop.
Yep.
Okay. A data diode will, you know, technologically prevent data from going, from quote unquote low security to high security. What a data diode doesn't do, nor does any other the other, be able to say, is the data that it's letting go through, is that good data or not? That's not what it's for.
Yeah.
So the issue is, if you can compromise the sensors
Hmm.
before they're converted to a packet, nobody's going to ever know it
No one's ever going to know. Yeah.
until you start seeing smoke coming up.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is there's such a rush to place AI on these networks, and
I know. I was at a,
it's super
there was a
dangerous.
house, yeah, there was a house hearing at Stanford.
Hmm.
They wanted to try to get Silicon Valley involved. This was House Homeland Security. This was what, I think it was in April. I went close. All of the people testifying, I think there were four people, but 3 of them were from the network or AI side. Um, the 4th was from national security.
Mm-hmm.
None of them were control systems. But what all of the discussion was, will AI secure everything? That's what it was about.
Wow. That's a
This is
a
this was
double-edged sword.
April. Yeah, no, this was April at Stanford. And this was a quote unquote remote House Homeland Cybersecurity Committee meeting.
So I don't know if you know this, but in August of 2025, was the Black Hat USA conference, where 3 researchers showed how a poison calendar invite could hijack a major AI model, and using the AI model, they flipped connected lights, the industrial control systems. Oh, they opened smart shutters and they turned on boilers. So
Yeah.
AI systems don't just answer anymore; they act. And can you trust their actions? That's the next thing. Knowing that we know that many of these systems have become sentient as well, right? Making their own decisions. So, what's to stop that same scenario instead of doing what I just said? How about shutting off a flood sensor or a process sensor or valves, or releasing chemicals into the water or into the air, or shutting down motors in a nuclear reactor, or changing a railway switch to cause
Yeah.
a rail collision? I mean, the list goes on, and I don't think that is being talked about or thought of. Anyway, I just
Well,
wanted to put that out there. I know.
there's a big ethics question that isn't being
Yeah.
answered.
Yep.
And here I live in Silicon Valley. I live in where all of this, or so much of this technology is being invented and whatever. And it's being pushed out without ever thinking of the consequences.
Hmm.
And what I've found, like I say, I spoke once at DEF CON, and I can tell you a little bit more about it, but what just made me so uncomfortable is when I was there, they had these different, if you will, communities, uh, hacking medical devices, hacking cars, hacking airplanes. And I'm going, why in God's green earth are we doing this?
Yeah.
I mean, you had it was like Halloween with all of the costumes, but they weren't costumes to these people. But then, like I say, I'm going, why do you want to hack a medical device? Well, because we can.
Because we can. Just imagine. I mean, let's say a head of state had a pacemaker. Um,
That's the
eh,
John Cheney thing.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And you know, you want to take them out. Well, there's no cybersecurity in the Internet of Bodies, not that I've noticed. And
Well, yeah, here was mine. Um, last year, not this year, last year, I went to RSA, which is in May, and I went the 2 days, and then on the Thursday I decided I'm not going to go back up. And there was an article in CNN 5 things, and it listed the number 224. And I'm going, what in the world is 224?
mhm.
So I started reading further. It turns out that was the number of people injured when a pump didn't work. Well, that got me even more interested. What this was a device that was monitoring flow via Bluetooth to a pump. and basically, providing the input for the pump. Well, what happened was that device, when it stopped working, eventually turned the pump off. And I'm going, gee, this must be in some type of industrial application. It turns out what this was an insulin pump that was using, this application
Mm-hmm.
running on Apple iOS. Not, this wasn't Windows, this was Apple iOS.
I don't think anything
And
is
what
safe.
happened was this app that was supposedly cyber secure kept turning off. And the iOS operating system automatically tried to turn it back on. And every time it did that, it started draining the power to the pump until the pump failed. FDA put out an emergency recall on this. Nowhere did they use the word cyber. So it turns out the FDA has these cybersecurity requirements for a cyber incident response plan.
Yep.
It was never initiated. Why? Because nobody called it cyber.
Yeah. There, it goes back to the disconnect we were
I,
talking
and I
about
and I,
earlier.
and I went and I looked at, we talked about what NERC isn't doing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's FDA, and I had put out a blog on this. There was a whole bunch of emergency recalls. Most of them were cyber related. Not one mentioned the word cyber.
Wow. So this goes,
You
I
look at
know,
what FDA wants in their requirements. It's all about the networks.
yeah. And this goes back, I know you've been keeping track of cyber incidents. If you can refresh me, since when, and control system cyber incidents, and how many have you identified in your database? I know you're keeping a
It's not public, but over 18.5 million and growing.
yeah,
And what's also growing is the lack of identifying any of them as cyber. Um, Ironically, the first one, this is an interesting one about the first one. People think cyber is since 2000, whatever. I was in Cleveland at an energy tech conference, and I was a keynote, and the other keynote was the last astronaut who walked on the moon. Okay. And he gave his presentation, and he was talking about how he was strapped. This is Apollo 17. And he was saying he was strapped, into the module on the nose cone. And right before they were supposed to blast off,
hmm,
the main computer lost communication with the fueling systems. And they had to make a decision. At that time, this is 1972. They had to make a decision. Do they abort or not? And what happened is they went out and they could see that the rocket was still fueling because the computer said it wasn't anymore. Well, once they realized it was still fueling, they felt confident enough to launch.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a computer, misdiagnosing or that's control system cyber. That's Apollo 17.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that. Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
I met, you know, the astronaut, um, Harrison Schmitt. He was the only astronaut who came from, education, not from the military. He was a geologist. He was the last one on the moon collecting rocks.
Mm-hmm.
It was really a fascinating discussion, but I had no idea until he was giving his keynote. And it was like, oh my, here you have computer and computer communications and misdiagnosing or miss whatever. That's what control system cyber is.
Yep.
It's 1972.
Wow.
And the most recent ones that I know of, I think, are last week or the week before. Only you won't see them because they weren't called cyber.
Yep.
And the
Uh,
utilities they're fighting this tooth and nail. NERC is fighting. Why they're fighting it, I don't know. Because what they're doing is keeping people from appreciating the magnitude of the problem.
exactly. And that's exactly why I started this podcast. Because that information, this type of information is not getting out there. And, not that this is, I hope this goes viral because people really need to know this. The general public has no idea, has absolutely no idea. The
You
state,
know, I, yeah, I want to mention one thing on the in case that it can go viral, because I hadn't really gotten to this one, but it's such an important one, and that's Aurora.
yes.
Okay. I'll give some background to it and then what's going on, and the fact that, yes, it's really real. The background was that Idaho National Lab, because
Hmm.
I was supporting them, had been doing lots and lots of demos. This is in the 2004, 5, 6 timeframe. And people would see them and go, ooh, ah, and they'd go back to their office and it would all fall flat on the floor. Nobody cared. So they decided, Idaho, and possibly DOE, DHS, don't remember,
Hmm.
to do a test that would actually break things, that would show that bits and bytes could do the same thing as sticks of dynamite. Thinking that if we did that, how could people turn their backs? So the interesting part about this is it kind of came from when Idaho was thinking about what should we do, that could kind of quote unquote guarantee, you know, a major physical problem. And somebody had brought up about, a type of event. And they said, but nobody would ever do that because, if you do that, it'll break.
Hmm.
And it was like, oh my God, that's what we really want. Because the good guys would never do it intentionally because they know things will break if they do it.
Right.
So the decision was made And then it was reinforced, because this is important, when there was a meeting on this subject, and the meeting was co-sponsored by the Chinese.
There's a fox guarding the hen house. Go
I'm
ahead.
just saying.
Yeah, yeah.
So the whole point was Aurora was going to be the demo to show people that you could do the same thing with bits and bytes as you would do with a stick of dynamite. And on paper, it was clear that this could happen. But when you get a 200-ton machine, people look at this and in their heart of hearts, they're going, well, this will never happen. Well, it did. Simply sending bits and bytes was able to totally destroy, physically destroy this 200-ton generator. And what happened was NERC attended the test and realized when they saw what was happening that it not only could destroy the generator, it could also destroy the transformers.
Mm-hmm.
This is a gap in protection of the electric grid everywhere. It's also one other thing. It's using the protection of the grid as the attack vector to damage anything connected to it.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
This is, if you will, the ultimate in an attack, using the protection as the attacker
Yep.
and using the most, quote unquote, critical of infrastructures as, what everybody else is trying to protect. That's the attack vector.
Yep. Yep.
And what's happened is when the utilities realized the significance of this, they basically circled the wagons to this day.
Yep.
Um, the Russians actually tried to use this against the Ukrainians in the 2016 in the second attack. Only they misconfigured it. There have been a number of real cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
There
actually,
aren't.
someone in the chat mentions the skirmish between India and Pakistan and the use of uh, the warfare. It looks like now I didn't know that they are attacking OT systems of dams and radars.
You know what? People aren't going to like this, but it is what it is. Cyber is the poor man's atom bomb.
It is in critical
It, it,
infrastructure. Yep.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, and trying to protect from bits and bytes is very hard.
Yep.
And it's harder when you don't have the right people working on it.
Yeah. That goes back to the fact that uh, the head of a lot of these agencies are appointed. So it's not what you know, it's actually who you know. So sometimes what you get at the top there is someone who is most likely not experienced in areas. Granted, you can hire people underneath you to do this, but if you just don't have a general understanding of some of the core um, elements of of the grid, of water systems, you name it, right? The food processing systems, healthcare, so on and so forth. You're really not going to do a service to the industry, and these appointees. I think part of the problem lies there too, is not
Yeah, and all
just
I'll
saying,
say there is,
just saying.
um, yes, and I just want to get across. Remember, this is since 1998.
Yeah, 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 Joe.
Um, People keep wanting to look at what's happening now or what just happened or whatever.
Hmm.
No, this is from 1998.
Yep. Since
And honestly, I can say this: when it comes to the control systems devices, not networks, but devices, we have gone backwards since 2000.
Yep, and it's even worse than that, Joe, because we've put Chinese equipment in our critical infrastructure, and so before we could purchase we were manufacturing some of it here in the United States, and granted, Germany's a big provider of critical infrastructure, uh, devices, systems, etc. But now we have replaced a lot of equipment with Chinese equipment, and I'd like for you to address that, because I think now we've even layered more vulnerabilities into our critical infrastructure in all areas, not just our electrical grid, not just,
Yeah.
but everywhere.
I'll give you a couple of things, including something from literally yesterday. Yesterday, the FCC uh, has ordered a crackdown on Chinese telecom equipment.
Oh yeah.
Only, what about our transformers? You know, here's the other. This goes back several years. This was a medical, oh, actually a pharmaceutical company,
Hmm.
and they were basically, in their clean room, they were, basically going through the sanitation process, and they ended up finding a a cellular modem that was basically buried within the equipment in
Yeah.
that clean room. Um, going back to China. And it wasn't just a cellular modem, there were also some sensors in there, and using the cellular modem to get the sensor data back to China. That was in a clean room in a pharma facility. Um, the concern I had was, obviously people were really concerned that they were, exfiltrating information. I was concerned, like we have here, could they be infiltrating, um, commands that could somehow compromise the clean room?
Yep.
Um, but we've known, you know, China has been an issue for a long time.
Hmm.
In, I think it was 2019, the director of national intelligence, and this was in the public national security assessment, stated that they believe that, transformers, circuit breakers, and inverters from China were cyber vulnerable.
Yep. And recently too, rogue communication devices, including hidden cellular radios and Chinese-made power inverters used in solar
Oh
farms
yeah.
across the United States.
Yeah.
That was just what, within the last month?
Well, that's been a big deal. I mean,
Is
President Biden had issued an executive order dealing with Chinese port cranes.
oh, that too. Yeah.
Okay, the with the inverters, part of the issue there was that this was, you had the batteries, the battery energy storage systems,
Yep.
and a major utility put some of those battery energy storage systems, and this is public, so I can say it, at Camp Lejeune. And it took, I think, 26 senators to force Duke to pull that Chinese, those Chinese batteries. Because Duke said, well, China said there's no communication.
Yep. Yep. And what people don't understand is that this could potentially allow remote access to disable inverters, do all kinds of damage to battery systems, and disrupting the power grid. I mean, causing
Oh,
widespread blackouts. So, I,
yeah. And
I,
then,
we could
yeah,
go
well,
on
the
and on.
inverter is
Yeah.
what makes up the equipment AC. Aurora is an AC issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's the out of phase issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, again, written articles on this. Um, we've, put articles, had one not too long ago in TMD World. We had one again in IEEE Computer. Um, People simply don't want to listen.
They don't. And well, we're going on what? Let's see, an hour and 42 minutes. Maybe we can wrap it up. I'd love to have you back because obviously there's no shortage of things to discuss and um, uh, in
I'm
this
really
area. And
selfish. Yeah.
please, everyone, like and share this video because information like this has to get out. It really does. It has to get out to the public so they can understand where we are in the state of America's critical infrastructure and the fact that really nothing has been done for decades. Um, so with that, Joe, do you want to wrap it up? And I want to have you back in the new year.
Yeah, by the way, I'm just looking now at the comments. I hadn't seen any, but
Oh,
first of
okay.
all, thank you for the invite. Um, um, the bottom line is it's real.
Mm-hmm. Very real.
Um, and all of the three monkeys, your ears, your eyes, your, whatever, isn't going to make it go away.
No,
Um,
no, it's not.
and, the issue, I saw one of the comments, and I go back to the fact we've had some major, major, major control system cyber incidents, major, but they simply weren't considered to be cyber. You know, plane crashes, killing, at least three or four that were directly cyber related, killed over 1,000 people. Um, you've had, you know, train crashes
Mm-hmm.
killing, hundreds. You've had pipeline ruptures killing, people. We've had outages that
Yeah.
have,
Power outage. Yeah.
I mean, it isn't just the US. I mean, this is all
Right.
over.
Worldwide. Yep.
Um, but I can't tell you why people refuse to address this. And I guess one other thing I want to close with. I believe the term OT has hurt us immensely.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, at places you'll see it, this is a funny one. In our, there's no college or university I know of, none, that offer a degree in OT. They may give a course that may say OT, but there is no university that actually gives a degree in quote unquote operational technology.
Right.
Yet all of these cyber types, that's the only term they want to use. You you simply can't get there from here.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And the CISOs, the chief information security officers, don't want to give up their control.
Yep.
If we don't solve the culture issue, we're not going to we're not going to solve this problem.
Right.
It's really that simple.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, with that closing statement,
yeah, I'm
like
sorry.
to
I know
thank
I
you,
shouldn't be
Joe. I
much
love to
roasting.
thank you so much. I mean, you and I have had lengthy phone calls and even lunch discussing a lot of this. You are to me a national treasure, and I thank you for your steadfast dedication to this. And everyone, please like and share this video on your in your LinkedIn, because I think it's running long, but people can listen to it while they're in the car. It's just so valuable to know this, and then to share this with others, because we're in a state right now where we need to inform the public, because anything can happen at any time right now at this juncture. And with that, I want to thank you. I want to thank the audience for joining in. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And please join us next Wednesday, November 5th, when we're going to have John Uhas, and we will be discussing healthcare and a Black Sky event. People don't people don't realize what's going to happen to our healthcare systems, meaning hospitals and other emergency response teams, if the power does go out. So, with that, thank you to our Grid Warrior audience, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.